Thank you for continuing to watch the Western Journal and this multi-part series with General Michael Flynn. This is part 2. Enjoy.
To jump to another component of where we're at, and I think what is happening, and it's not that Christians in politics or politics and Christians, because like what he says is right. Some people are out there and it's like, you know, I preach, I say these things and give me some money. And then I go in and I do just the opposite.
Sure.
And then I come back in 2 years or 4 years and say, give me some more money. And I go back and do just the opposite. And I don't act in the way that I speak, right? I'm not the same person that gets up in the morning when I look in the mirror, when I walk away from the mirror. Okay, when I'm all by myself, looking at myself and trying to understand who am I, do I pretend to be somebody else when I'm away from it? Yeah. A lot of Christians do that. And we're in a place now where the Christian community, all ecumenical components of that, have to start to really think about that.
Yeah.
Because something in the Christian faith is not working. So when people tell me, and they tell me all this all the time now, especially now, that well, we've been doing this for 20 years, we've been doing this for 10 years, we've been doing this for 40 years, we've been doing this our whole, and I'm thinking to myself, well, and in fact, it's not just thinking to myself, I will say to them, well, why isn't it working? What's not working? Mm-hmm. And the different faiths in our country, and it's not just Christian, but it's the faiths within inside of the Christian community, they've all kind of created their own little walls around themselves. So, and they all need to understand that, because those walls have to come down. Right. We all have different traditions, but we all have one doctrine. And that doctrine is the Bible. And then that doctrine translates, or it has been translated, as the fulfillment of the promises of Christ, but the promises of really the things that come out of the commandments. And then you fast forward to the creation of the Constitution, which really, when you think about the founders and you read their history, you read their notes, you read their diaries, you look at their debates, they really argued principles and values and components of the Bible. It's like 75%.
Even those who didn't even really believe them,
right,
adhere to them,
right,
said it's still a good model,
right,
to set
right.
this up by.
So the Constitution is the fulfillment of the promises of really our Bill of Rights. So all that said, I think that what the American people are seeking right now, they're seeking authenticity.
Yeah.
They're absolutely seeking
100%.
Authenticity. They are seeking and they want courage in their leaders. And courage means that you are going to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. You're going to choose the good path. You know, it may drive you out of politics. Right. Okay, but you can live with yourself. But over the wrong, you know, the wrong path of sort of the evil path, the easier path. The easier path is always the one that's gonna give you a handout. It's gonna give you something. You know, it's gonna entice you to come this way, vote this way, do this. You know, don't worry about you'll get voted back in. All you got to do is go back, and those dummies, those irredeemables, those deplorables, those chumps, whatever word you want to use that we've been called, right? That Americans have been called, those crazy Christians. Yeah. Okay? So authenticity, courage, and courage has to be fearless. Courage, because the relentlessness, and I know this, I mean, I live this, the relentlessness of media attacks to try to box you in who you are, Flynn, right? And so, you know, if you allow others to define you, then you've already lost the war, right? So don't allow anybody to define you. And then the third thing, I think this is really super important, and it's something that we lack today in government, and that's accountability. So people are seeking authenticity in the people that they're dealing with. They want to see courage, the courage to choose the harder right path, and they want accountability. I mean, we hold our children accountable for you know, don't take this, don't do that. You're supposed to, right? And those and accountability, there's elements of accountability that are super important. There's moral law and there's man's law. Okay? So moral law is something that we actually, even for because most people that listen to this, a lot of the women that listen to this are probably single moms, raising a child or two or three. If the family unit is broken down in this country, and so I'm pro-family, but I mean, but you have to recognize reality. So, a mother, and I'll just use a mother because it's normally that's the case, but a family unit or certainly a mother is teaching their children to do something, do this, that's the right thing to do. Don't do this, if they got a couple of kids, it's like, don't take your sister's toys, don't do, all these things that we're teaching them to do, the do's and don'ts of the development of a child, those are moral things that a parent is teaching their children. Right. Because when they get into the world of adulthood, they know they know in their heart, they know in their gut what's right and what's wrong. Right. And they instinctively and intuitively start to follow man's laws and obey man's laws. Because most
you get in trouble if you don't.
Right, because you get in trouble if you don't. Yeah. And most people don't know the law.
Right.
They just know that that's not right, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's this idea of accountability in our society. We started early on in life, but now what we're seeing, what the American public are seeing, is the lack of accountability in our government and in these government institutions that we have. There's no accountability in Congress. They get away with everything. There's no accountability in our Department of Justice. They get away with convicting people instead of discovering the truth.
Right.
It's huge.
Right.
It's huge. It's like the Sidney Powell book. I'll give her a plug on The Conviction Machine. Right. So this idea of accountability is so important, because if we don't hold, if I'm held accountable for my actions and you do the exact same thing or worse and you're not held accountable, why?
Right.
Why does there seem to be a two-tiered system of accountability?
And why would anybody have any faith in that system?
So back to this guy's article, Williams's article, I think it's important that he doesn't address that. And I didn't read the article, so maybe he does, but I don't believe he did.
No, I don't think he did.
It's the idea of accountability is so vital in a system where we have something we call the rule of law. And the rule of law is a sacrosanct component of our Constitution and of the United States of America. And there's no other country on the planet that has the rule of law that we are supposed to have. Yeah. And it's breaking down. It's breaking down because of evil, of people who are not good in our system of government. Back to my earlier description of this military industrial security state.
Right.
Okay? This bloated bureaucracy with a certain number of political appointees who are just basically not good people. And they flow in and out of our government, in and out of Washington, D.C.
So, and you've certainly experienced that. And in telling people, oh yeah, I'm going to be talking with General Flynn this week, the overwhelming response I got from people was, man, they did him wrong. It was always expressed in different ways.
Right.
Man, Deep Space went after him. And I want to read a quick quote, which you will probably recognize since you wrote it, from a few months ago in an op-ed that you published in the Western Journal. Yeah. And it's just a couple of sentences here. You said, when I became the favorite target of the left for the crime of helping candidate Trump win the presidency of the United States, and then serving as his first national security advisor, I was abandoned by many who said they were my friends. Those who I had previously spent time with suddenly stopped calling, texting, and engaging with me and my family. Only when I needed them most did they reveal their true colors. That must have been a lonely time, or felt like a lonely time. How did you get through that? How did you and your family get through that?
Yeah, so, and I appreciate that, because I think it's really important for everybody and anybody that listens to this. All of us are going to experience in our lives tragedy,
right,
or really, really difficult circumstances, right? I mean, tragedy to me is like the death of a child or something. Sure. That's a real, you know, I mean, when I think about it, just thinking about that, like I reflect back on like the Gold Star community in our country that gave their children, young adults, to go serve in our military, and then they go off to war and they get killed, and they never have had an opportunity, or maybe they did get married and have a child, and so there's a legacy. But but you know what I'm saying? It's like, so that's tragedy. That's real tragedy. Or somebody who sadly loses a sibling or child or whatever. And I've gone through that in my life. I had a sister that died tragically. And so you begin to look around when tragedy occurs, when a really incredibly difficult circumstance occurs, and you're expecting people to stay in your life, to say, hey, Mike, I know you. I've known you all my life. I've known you, a long time. I've known you 10 years. I've served with you. I've done this. I've done that. To like reach out and say, hey, this is BS. I don't know. I can't believe that they're doing this to you. I'm so sorry. If you need anything, you let me know.
Right.
And that's not blind loyalty. That's friendship.
Right.
Because blind loyalty can also be wrong. You know. Sure. But friendship, true friendship, and I state it as true friendship, particularly like in the letter that my wife and I wrote when everything was finally wrapped up, everything was finally buttoned down. I use the word true friendship because true friendship, I discovered it exists only with really good people, really, really solid good people who either know you intimately and personally or get to know you. Because a lot of millions and millions of people across the world, and certainly across this country, they discovered and they got to know General Flynn and my family, and they all of a sudden, instead of running away from me like these quote unquote friends did, who ran away from me, because it's like, if I associate myself with Mike Flynn, then maybe I'm not going to get hired. If I say, hey, this is wrong, they shouldn't be doing this to Flynn, or in some cases, some of these people were, held, I would say strong influence. They didn't come forward to say, this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. Nobody did. The people that you normally think about would. And I will sit here today, as I've said this to others, in the past months, that I am not surprised. I'm not surprised. Does it hurt? Yeah. I mean, I'm a human being. It hurts, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. So what I did discover, and this is really what gives me hope in the future and gives me strength of my convictions, is that the American people, they discovered me, and they all of a sudden befriended me. And I'm talking millions of people that I'll never meet, that I try to go and say thank you to as many of them as possible. And I've written a lot of letters in the last, 4.5 years of being politically persecuted for my stand for, a non-swamp creature, to put it politely. And that was really what it was all about. And so now all of a sudden you begin to say on these friends, why I'm not surprised, because I always knew what their ideological lean was. Sure. And I was okay with that. It's like, in my time in the military, we would gripe about decisions that were made, but it was never one of these. And I said, then to use a word, for me to use the word never is a strong use of that word. But I was never once that I was going to sit there and behind the scenes go, that president or that politician, it's just like, hey, I didn't like the decisions, but it's like what we're always taught. If it's a legal, ethical, and moral decision, okay, then you got to follow it, right? And you shut up and sold, you salute, and you move out, and you can provide your best advice.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And at a certain point in time, when you become more senior, as I did, if all of a sudden you were asked a question you got to tell the truth about, you got to say what you believe, right? At a certain level, in fact, at any level, but at a certain level, when you're all of a sudden, you're at a political level, which is at the 3 and 4 star level, at a political level, and you're asked a question, do you go with the political line or do you go with what you believe to be true based on experience, judgment, and your own study? And that's where you become sideways with the political leanings of, whoever's in the White House, right?
That goes back to courage you were talking about.
Right. And it's courage to take the harder right. And because in the way of accountability in this friendship stuff, that the most important person or thing or entity to be accountable to is yourself. First, right? I mean, and you can say, to draw it into sort of the Christian idea, are you accountable to God? Well, if you're not accountable to yourself, you're probably not accountable to God. Sure. So faith, family, and true friendship are what got me through, the sort of the fire of this, the like Psalm 23, right? I always go back to reflect on Psalm 23 because, somebody sent it to me a long time ago, and I read it, the whole thing, and that part about, yea, that I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil because thou art with me. I mean, it makes me emotional right now because I was in the shadow of the valley of death, but I don't feel, because it goes back to what I said about Gold Star or a young adult who was killed in combat. I was alive, and I still had my wits. I still had, I discovered, and really it was the other way around. The American people discovered me and helped me and my family, and so I was alive. So I was in that valley of the shadow of death, and I could fear no evil because I felt that something was happening. And I sit here today and I so what was it? Well, I don't really know. I really don't know. But I do know one thing. That I sort of came out of that abyss and talk about fighting evil. Yeah. So back to the Williams article, this point about evil and good, it exists. It's always existed. The problem today is that it exists in places where it's so thick. Yeah. It's so thick. And now the big question is, from a hope perspective, right? Is it recoverable? Are we recoverable as a nation? Are we still waxing as the moon waxes and rises, or are we waning as the moon sets and falls over the horizon? Where is the United States of America in our lifespan of history? As I talked about earlier with the fact of nation states that rise and fall.